Sorry, I know I waited a while. I wanted to make that video quite a while ago, but that just didn't end up happening. About the lonely to basically expert explorer. Alright, and then there's the beginning of the end, which I kind of agree with some of the reviews and everything on that. Just more of the anime is more of just a slideshow of the manga. I was kind of gonna disagree because I was like, at least I had color, and then I went back and actually started reading the manga again, and I was like, yeah, not really. I was like, all it really does is like kind of a helpful reminder, being like, hey, maybe for those who are a fan to go back and like check on the updates of the manga and like start reading it again and being like, oh yeah, I read this, maybe I should go back and read it for the most part. That's all I feel like the anime really does for the beginning of the end. I'm pretty sure it's actually called the beginning after the end, but it's the beginning of the end. And then, according to the reviews, it's more of just the end before it even begins. It's kind of how they feel about it. Yeah. But for the most part, it's just a slideshow, and it's about a king. And then I've been starting to catch up on it, and it's kind of exciting. It's still pretty slow in the beginning and everything, and it's a lot like My Jobless Reincarnated, especially at the beginning. You're kind of like, this is identical. There's no difference. It's a little bit better though. We don't get any of his perviness, which is great. They're all like, and refused to feed from his mother. Just a gentleman. No, I think that's the exact quote from Kane, probably. I've been going back and rewatching all my anime. Not my anime. My favorites and everything, because I've been making a list, trying to write down all of them I've ever watched. The list is getting very, very long. And then also, I found a few along the way and wrote them down, and then actually went back and watched the whole thing after looking them up. Like, The Unwanted Undead Adventure. Pretty good. He somehow remains mostly like himself and his personality, and still has all of his personality and memories, even though he was killed by a dragon, and his biggest dream was to just become like platinum. But even after like 2 years, he was only able to just stay as a bronze adventurer. And he traveled like deeper into the dungeon, and he ended up in an area that hadn't really, at a level that hadn't been explored as much, and that's how I end up being killed by the dragon. And then he turns into an undead, and then somehow he regains in form, and it's mostly his life. And then he's trying to still, because he still holds onto his dream to become a platinum adventurer, and he also gains the ability when he fights other adventurers to evolve and to basically level up in a way that he hadn't been before as a human and become stronger. It's a pretty good one. It's pretty like slow paced. It's not like a lot of adventure or anything, not a lot of action. It's pretty good. It's pretty interesting. It's not bad at all. Alright, what was I talking about? Yeah, the beginning of the end. The beginning after the end. If you look at what I said, it's the same. I'm like, nah, different. Okay, sorry, getting caught up on the name. You can say hi to you instead, because it's boring to look at my face, and I'm pretty ugly. Anyway, sorry, my problems. Anyway, okay, blah 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 blah. It's pretty interesting. Kid wakes up, he's reincarnated, but instead he still was like in medieval times. He didn't come from Japan or anything like that. He was actually a king. That's pretty interesting. And he's also not a pervert, so already better than Jobless Reincarnated, and he wasn't horrible to his family and didn't even bother to go to his parents' funeral or cry or care about it, and he just lived in his room forever. Yeah, he was trash. Yeah, he tries to like act nice to his family and everything and do nice things for his family, but he doesn't really do that much for his family. He doesn't spend that much time with them or even like consider them as his real family for a while. and he doesn't really anything deserving to really be called family. I was like, he's not a good kid. Like, even after reincarnation, he's like tries to be a good son, but he doesn't really do much for his family and really help them that much. So it didn't really change at all. Changes like a little bit. He tries to be a little bit better and tries to do things and tries to help people a little bit more. And able to help people a little bit, but still, he's got a long way to go. And is not a good person. It's still a pervert and still like a creep, so kind of undoes all the good he tries to do. Pretty useless. And like he's also like not trying to, like the only reason he ends up actually being mostly faithful to his new wife and everything like that is just because he couldn't get it up. I was like, that's no. And I'm like, it's also, I was reading other random stuff and I was like, they might not make this into an anime just because of like how crude and like how adult and mature it is. Mostly I preferred it. Like mostly just like all the fan service stuff and stuff like that. But then I was like, they made jobless reincarnated. Yeah, they kept him all of his perversions, so I guess it's not as far as I think it was. So yeah, because the new one I was thinking about that they might make into anime and everything like that. Maui, manga, whatever. To me, it's all the same. Anyway, it's Doomsday. I'm not sure the entire title, but I think it's like Tyrant, or no, it's like Ruthless, a Tyrant or Ruthless something, Ruthless guy, in the apocalypse. Basically, he just hoards all the resources and everything, and then you find out that he actually like died or something the first time. Yeah, he died once. He goes back in time, and then right before the apocalypse, which is not unnormal for a lot of scenarios. But he is selfish and he doesn't care, and he's like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna hoard a bunch of supplies and everything, and then I'm not gonna be really nice to a lot of people, and so I gonna take advantage of what I know and everything, and not really get close to anyone. And then he slowly meets a few people that he learned that he'd seen as really powerful and seen as really trusting, and good leaders and strong leaders from the past, and he befriends them. So yeah, he's very rich in resources and takes advantage of that, and then he obviously gets basically a harem from that. Oh, and then they do have something I had mostly only read about in like actual. I kind of feel like maybe they were better stories. He eats basically monster cores to level up. Yeah. So the zombies and all these monsters, the higher level they are, and usually the harder they kill, the bigger they are, the more they kill, and all of that. They develop a core, usually in their brain. That's normally what I read. Yeah, but it doesn't seem to be as gross in their story, especially since they had colored it and everything like that. Probably didn't want to show that. So, you kill the monsters, you kill the zombie or the cannibal people. A lot of them had mutated and everything like that, especially from eating zombies and people and all that. So yeah, we kill them, and then the more powerful they are, the bigger and more powerful little stones that hold superpower abilities, and you eat those and you can become more powerful, except obviously there's the risk of like parasites and those abilities taking over and you just turning into another mutated monster. So it's mostly a game of luck, and it's also a real game of luck to start out with, because not everyone gets an ability, and not that many people survive in the first place because a lot of them turn into zombies. Most of my knowledge is not from remembering or reading the plot or the beginning, especially since it mostly just skips all of that. It's from me reading other stories. But yeah, a small amount stay normal people, and even smaller than amount gain a little bit of abilities. So humans mutate a little bit to have a little bit more of an edge, a little bit of powers, but it's really nothing when you have a horde of zombies. And these zombies aren't really that stuff. All right, back to I only really started, and there was only a little bit free of the first episodes, and I started it, and then I probably fell asleep. I was like, I didn't watch any of it. Yeah, except for a first little bit of the first episode, and then I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go back and read this. For the beginning of the end. Sorry, I switched topics. Anyway, so the beginning of the end and everything like that, it gets a lot more interesting because turns out. And then also I was like, this is really similar. I was like, feels like it's way too similar. Because he also got a Sylphie. So a very similar name, if not the same. And then he also had a maid at first, and he also has a magic user mother and a sword using father. Except he's not more interested in magic, and he's not more talented in magic. And he used most of his magic just to enhance his sword training, and he was also already good at sword training, and he's much more focused on training with the sword. And he awakens his magic core at age 3, and then there's also a problem of him having too much power and awaken too early. So his servant actually turns out to be a dragon, and she helps seal his core so he can survive. And then he tries to awaken it a little bit more when he's older and everything, and so they gotta keep it sealed. Gotta seal his magic core and everything because it's way too much magic to be in his body. And obviously, if it was left unchanneled and unhindered, it would destroy his body because it's way too powerful. But yeah, he learned a little bit of magic, but yeah, he just learned the bare basics. He hasn't really taken that much interest or really explored that much. And he could maybe use a tiny bit of fire first. But he mostly just focuses and trains by himself. He just trains with the sword all the time, and then his father will occasionally spar with him. And he really likes to spar, and he's very happy that his son likes to take after the sword. And so he's very happy. And then we have his mother is very disappointed and is always yelling at her husband for training with her son. She's like, no, he needs to learn, and he is too young, far too young, to be playing with the sword. So she's usually yelling at them, and she's like, you went too hard on him, and she's always lecturing him. But they're overall a pretty happy family. And then after a while, he is being blessed to going to have a baby sister. So his mom gets pregnant as well. But there's no cheating father or any of that, and unlike Jobless. So yeah. But it's all very similar. And then you also learn that the only real difference, well, the main difference is in the beginning of his life, from his past life and everything like that, is he's very happy and just wants to spend time with his loving family. And he's very happy, and he's like, oh, this is how it feels to be in a family and everything like that, because he was king, and a lot of the movies and stuff like that, he had to slaughter all of his family members to gain the throne. And yeah, there was no love originally, and also seems like in a clip later on that maybe his parents died pretty early on, so there wasn't much of a chance anyway for him to have their affection. But it didn't seem like there was much affection in the first place. It was more of just on the power and raising him up to be a king. But yeah, his life was pretty easygoing. They hang out and everything. I don't remember. I read why. I didn't reread that part. But anyway, they're traveling. I'm pretty sure just bandits. Yeah, whatever. Bandits or whatever. Child his parents were actually famous adventurers, and sometimes his adventure buddies will come and visit and stuff like that. I don't remember why or what happened, but anyway, they were traveling either back home or away from home, whatever. They were traveling. He gets separated. They get attacked or whatever, either by bandits or beasts or whatever. He falls down a cliff. He survives. He ends up meeting his mate and everything. It's probably likely because of his mate. He goes into a dungeon. He finds out Sylvie's actually a dragon, and turns out she's about to die and everything, and she's just given birth to a baby. He ends up her dying wish and everything is to protect the baby. So he protects the dragon's egg, and he takes it with him. I don't remember why. Probably bandits or monsters or whatever. She was injured. But whatever. She's a dragon. She died. He takes the egg. He travels on his way. He's trying to find his family because they got separated. And then he comes across a wagon and he finds out that they're slave traders. And he's like kind of upset about it, but he's like, none of my business. I gotta go on my way and everything like that. And then he kind of feels guilty about it, probably because he heard like a girl scream or whatever, they were hitting her. And he's like, yeah, I can't stand idly by. I gotta do something about this. And so he stays hidden, and he's like, if I take them all on at once, obviously I will lose and die. So let's just slowly try and assassinate them all. And catch them off guard and attack behind. Let's use a little bit of magic, mostly just to boost myself, and to use like as a sword to stab someone, and then let's use that slave trader's dagger or knife and pick that up so we actually have a sword and continue our boost and running around. And just our general boost and enhancement is all he uses for the most part. He's able to kill all the slave traders, and he's able to rescue the little girl, and then he finds out that she's an elf, and then he finds her clothes in the wagon, and he obviously covers her eyes, so she can't see anything as they go forward and travel away from the wagon. Then he uncovers them, and then they talk a little bit, and he wants to leave her in the woods, but she's like, no, only adults can stay here because otherwise I'll be eaten by monsters and stuff like that. Even though I'm an elf, only older elves are actually safe and like protected by the forest and everything, and monsters just normally avoid them because they're more powerful when they're much older. So she's just eating beast food, and then she doesn't know where she lives or anything like that, and he's like, I gotta take you home, or I might just drop you off somewhere that's safe, like a village or something like that. She doesn't know where her home is or anything like that, but apparently she ends up meeting or talking to a bird, and then they go on their very long journey to try and find her home. Then they go and find her home, and then it almost causes like a fight and everything, because it turns out she's the princess of the elves, and they take her in the elf kingdom and all of that. They take him inside after blindfolding him because they don't want him to know anything, and they all hate humans. They still hate humans, but they're willing not to kill him, but they keep trying to want to fight him. And they're like, okay, I guess we won't fight you because you saved our princess. And then they continue. And then he's like, can I get a ride home? Let me just stay the night, and then let me get a ride home. The princess really wants him to stay, but he's trying to get her to agree to let him leave, and then she kind of does. And then he gets examined by their doctor and everything like that, and they're like, your core is quite unstable, and they find out that he got the will of the dragon. So when she died, she wasn't just, part of her will was to protect her baby. And then that gives him powers, and it's mostly just the core of the dragon. She was dying anyway, so she gave it to him, and it gives him more power and everything like that. But it's very strong, and whenever he's exhausted or tired or anything like that, or tries to use magic, it hurts a lot. His chest hurts a lot because the core is unstable and he doesn't know how to use it. It's kind of like another core, the will is. And so it's basically just another really big power that's unstable in his body, and then the elves are willing to train him so he will not die. And he can actually use the power because he's in a dangerous state at the time. He's able to talk to their wizard doctor and all of that, so he's able to give a telepathic message to his parents, finding out so they know he's safe, and they're all good. And then he's able to use a little bit of the power of the dragon and more magic and everything like that. And it's been about 3 years. And then he finally says goodbye to the elf princess, and they help him go back and find information about his family. And they take him back home, and they drop him off, and then he is able to reunite with his family and meet up with he meets up with the lords that are hosting his family, who've been taking care of them, and he meets his baby little sister who was born while he was away. And his parents and everyone's very overjoyed, and then they got a big surprise that he ended up telling his parents to keep him being alive or anything about him a secret. And he tells them that he's fine now. He told them that he was a little ill, so he wasn't going to be home for a little while. But he was safe and that they were healing him up in the Elf Kingdom. And then he goes back. He reunites with the family. They're all happy. And then they talk and everything. And then he's training, and he uses a little bit more of, well, actually, a little bit right before his journey home. He's able to finally use a little bit of the will of the dragon. He's able to control it, but still not really use much of it. And that ends up awakening the baby dragon and we get a cute little baby dragon that calls him Mama. So he became a mom. He became a mama. Yeah, he became a cute mom. Well, the dragon's very cute. And he calls him Mama a lot. He's very adorable. They communicate most of the time, just telepathy with the dragon. Not really able to talk to other humans or anything like that yet. But yeah, she's very cute. She straight away, they're able to communicate because basically right after she was born, she bit him on the arm, and that ended up forming a contract, so they're able to talk. And the first words, I think it's a girl, might be a boy, unsure of the gender of the baby. Anyway, let's just go with the girl. She calls him Mama, and it's very cute. And then he goes home and reunites with his family, and then they're all like, we're gonna lie and tell everyone that it's like a magical beast, so no one suspects that I have a dragon. No. I have a baby dragon, no one can tell. We're gonna lie and come up with a lie, which is partially true, but more of just that I found apparently a scaled wolf. Scaled wolf's mother died, leaving me the egg of her baby. Well, not egg, just leaving the baby. And he's like, oh, it happened a few months ago, because she was only born a few months ago from her egg. But it had been around 3 years since he picked up the egg. But yeah, so she's a baby dragon, and then she actually ends up growing pretty quickly over the next few months. And he's just chilling and hanging out with his family, and then they make plans for him going to school, and then he's like, no, I want to wait until I'm much older, and then I also want to try and become an adventurer, and then we can also reunite and hang out with my dad's Adventurers fans, and they can be my guards while I go on adventures, because you're all terrified of losing me again, and I'm sorry for worrying you. And now I will be perfectly safe while I adventure for a few years, and I will visit you at least every 2 months. During my adventuring time and my entire time before I start school, which should be in about 3 years. So yeah, that's caught up to what I've been reading in the manga, and it should be a little bit further around the same year, I think. The anime should have cut off. But anyway, yeah. But I don't feel like they've probably caught up to the dragon. And I'm like, the entire point in like the entire cover, I was like, we read it because there's a tiny dragon on the cover. That's the entire point. I want to see the tiny cute dragon. That's all I want to see. And so I'm very excited and going to read a lot more about that. But yeah, that's everything for the beginning after the end. So the beginning of the end. Now we should wave it bye. Bye.